It's late, you have a major exam in a few days, and you've spent the last 2 hours hammering the same kind of problem over and over. Say, solving quadratics, French verb conjugations, or binary trees. Somewhere in hour 2, the friction vanishes. The problems start flowing. You barely have to think to execute the move, and you lean back with that satisfying sensation that you finally got this. But a week later, you sit down for the test, and half of the material is gone. Not fuzzy, gone. You can't make sense of it, even though you were performing perfectly just a few days ago. It raises a question that should bother you. What if that exact feeling of fluency is actually a warning sign? What if the ease you feel in the moment is a terrible predictor of whether you'll remember any of this next week? Most of us default to a method called blocked practice. You take one topic, focus on one skill or one type of problem, and drill it in a single uninterrupted block. You master one thing before moving on to the next. The mechanical flaw here is that after the first few repetitions, your brain stops asking the hard questions. It already knows which tool to grab. It just runs the exact same move on autopilot, repeating a motion you've already loaded into your hands. Robert Bjork, a memory researcher at UCLA, calls this the fluency illusion. We mistake the ease of the moment for actual skill, unaware that we are just repeating a temporary pattern rather than building a lasting memory. When we chase that smooth, comfortable feeling, we are reliably walking toward the strategy that leaves us with the least. We feel so productive in the moment, but we end up empty when the real test arrives. The alternative has an ugly name, interleaving, but the concept is simple. Instead of drilling one type of problem in a long block, you shuffle them. You mix quadratics with geometry and word problems, so you never do the same thing twice in a row. To test this, researchers Doug Rohrer and Kelli had students practice 4 types of math problems. Group A practiced them blocked, all of type 1, then all of type 2. Group B got the exact same problems, just shuffled into a random order. During the practice session itself, the blocked group looked like the winners. Their accuracy shot up immediately. They were faster, smoother, and more confident in their answers. The interleaved group struggled. Because the problem types kept changing, they fumbled. They were slower and made more mistakes. If you were watching the session, you would have bet your money on the blocked group every time. Then came the test 1 day later, and the results flipped. The students who had interleaved their practice, the ones who looked worse and struggled the whole time, roughly doubled the scores of the blocked group. One group rehearsed comfort and walked away with very little. The other group sat in difficulty and walked away with something that lasted. Shuffling works because it mirrors the reality of a test or a job.
Real life never hands you a neatly labeled problem. It hands you a mess and asks the harder question, which approach does this even need? Interleaving forces you to answer that question every single time. Before you can solve anything, you have to stop, look, and decide what tool you're even supposed to be using. You aren't just learning how to execute a move, you're training the judgment of when to use it. That judgment is the part of the skill that actually survives. This applies even to fuzzy visual concepts. Kornell and Robert Bjork tested this by asking people to learn the distinct painting styles of different artists. They found that mixing the artists together allowed the brain to learn a category by bumping it up against the thing it is not. Seeing a Monet right next to a Renoir makes the differences jump out. You notice the specific hazy brushstrokes and the way the light is captured in this landscape. Now, compare that to the more defined figures and portraits of Renoir. While blocking hides these nuances by grouping them together, interleaving puts the contrast right in front of your eyes. Interleaving significantly outperformed blocked practice in the final test. Yet when the researchers asked the participants which method helped them learn more, 80% of them insisted that blocking had been more effective. We are wired to trust the feeling of ease. It means our own sense of how well we are learning is not just slightly off, it can point in the completely wrong direction. Robert Bjork calls these techniques desirable difficulties. The struggle of having to figure out which tool to use and the effort of switching gears is exactly what carves the memory deeper. However, there is a catch. If you shuffle material that you don't understand yet, you aren't building judgment, you're just thrashing.
The formula is to block briefly to grasp the basic shape of a technique, and then immediately start interleaving to actually keep it. When the practice feels frustrating, that isn't a sign it's failing. That is the sound of the work being done. You have to make peace with feeling worse in the moment in exchange for being better later. On a normal Tuesday, this looks like pulling problems from chapters 2 through 5 and shuffling them into one single mixed set, or rotating through 3 different verb tenses in a language session rather than drilling just one. Expect it to feel worse. The first few sessions of interleaving will make you feel slower and less competent than before. The old comfortable groove will be gone. Every instinct will tell you to go back to the ease of blocked practice because it feels like progress. You have to remember that in this case, your instinct is a liar. Stop using comfort as your compass. Shuffle the deck.
Trade the easy feeling of tonight for the version of you later who actually remembers the material.